On today's PMEA Take Note podcast, we are tackling a bit of a big question. What is the role of the arts in society? We'll talk about that and more on today's PMEA's Take Note podcast. Hello, everybody. I'm Mark Despotakis, and welcome to this edition of PMEA's Take Note podcast. Today, we are speaking with Joseph Arnold, and he's going to tell you who he is and what he does a lot better than I can. But off the bat, I can tell you he is the author of the book Soulforce: How to Discover Your Artistic Purpose, Create More Freely, and Make Art That Matters. And I think we'll hit on some of those topics today. Joseph, thanks for being with us.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Mark. Thanks so much.
So, like I said, it's probably much better for you to tell us about yourself than me to try to do it and not do a great job of it. So, tell us a little bit about you and your
Mhm.
work, particularly with the Soulforce Arts Institute.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I get that what I do is a little bit out of the ordinary, a little unusual, and so I'm very happy to explain that because it's yeah, yeah, a lot of fun and brings me to life and also my students. So I'm a violinist and an Alexander Technique teacher. I live in Philadelphia, and as you said, I'm also an author, and it all surrounds this idea of soul force. So maybe I'll say just very briefly what I do in terms of teaching and my philosophy of soul force arts, and then I'll share a little bit more of the ideas behind what I do, just so you can get a sense of what it's about and how this actually relates to musicians and artists in the world. So basically, Soulforce Arts Institute provides training and thought leadership to musicians and other kinds of artists to help them discover a deeper sense of purpose in life and behind their creative life, help them be free of creative blocks like injuries and stage fright and self-doubt and inner critic and all kinds of other things that come up in music lessons, but a lot of music teachers maybe don't have all the tools to deal with. And a lot of my training deal that I offered deals precisely with those kinds of issues. And the Soulforce Arts Institute also has sort of a broader aim and focus as well, in that I also ask the question of what's ours to do as musicians and artists in a world that seems to have lost its mind. So, on the one level, I offer very practical training in how to be free of tension and injuries and pain that can come sometimes from playing. And this is my background. Like I said, I'm a violinist. I used to have injuries in both arms. This is a long time ago, back in college, and I could barely play anymore. And the Alexander technique is what helped me with that. And so now a big part of what I teach is I help musicians who are in kind of a similar place, finding injuries, that they have these injuries and they're not really able to play as much as they would like. It's very painful and uncomfortable, and I help them relieve all of that. And I also help musicians relieve stage fright and other kind of emotional blocks that come up in high pressure situations. Um, and I also love thinking about these larger issues in life. What is our purpose as musicians and artists? And how does that inform how we create, how we teach, how we make a living? And if you're okay with that, like to give you a little bit about the philosophy and some of how I think about all that.
Yeah, please do.
Okay, so at the big picture, right now, a lot of people might agree that there's a certain amount of strife and turbulence going on in the world. There's political strife and societal divisions and all kinds of ecological problems. And there's also what we might call the meaninglessness crisis, a crisis of meaning. And this is where the diseases of despair come from, and the sense of nihilism, and the political extremism, and addiction, and distraction. Like all this stuff is all connected. And the image that a lot of people have is that the world is on fire. And so one of the questions that I ask and where I begin the book is basically asking what's ours to do? What could we do as musicians, as music teachers? Is there a role for us? And this is kind of a tricky question because our society kind of says that the arts are nice, but basically frivolous, self-indulgent hobbies. And of course, there are exceptions to this, but this is the basic message that I get when I hear that when school budgets are tight, the arts are the first thing to be cut, right? And it needn't necessarily be this way. This is a reflection of how our society views the arts, and so one of the results of this is that many musicians and artists kind of have this sense of futility and hopelessness. Here we are. We have all these gifts and talents, and we've put all this time and heart and soul and blood, sweat, and toil into our art, our music, our craft, and yet our society tells us, like, actually, it doesn't really matter that much that you've done all that. It's not really going to make that big of a difference to these big issues in the world. And so a lot of musicians, we love what we do, and somewhere deep inside of us, we know that this can't possibly be true. That there must be something bigger for us, and yet we don't really know how to articulate it so well in this society. What is that bigger thing? And so, for me, that's where this idea of Soulforce comes in. Soulforce, I first heard of it through a podcast with this guy Jamie Wheel, who's an author I like, and he was asked kind of a similar question. So, with all the societal strife and ecological problems and pandemics and everything, what chance does humanity have of surviving the next few decades? And he said, well, to me, it's either Soulforce or bust. And I had no idea what Soulforce was at that moment. I'd never heard of it. Turns out it comes from Mahatma Gandhi's movement. It's a translation of his Satyagraha. And in any case, but I immediately had this sense like, oh, wow, that sounds so similar to what I want to see in the world. And actually a lot of what came out of my teaching in the Alexander technique, where I would help students let go of the excess tension in their playing, and their bodies would relax, and all of a sudden their music would become luminous, resonant, emotionally gripping, even if they're just playing Twinkle Twinkle. So I made this connection. And it's my belief that the world needs our soul force as musicians, as artists, so that we can collectively better navigate our times. And in fact, this is what artists are meant to do. Throughout history, artists have been sort of the vanguard of culture, helping people grow and evolve and heal and make sense of the world, and especially during turbulent times, so that artists have a very important role right now. Given our training and our commitment to beauty, we have this very special possibility, responsibility even, to show up, to dive deeper into our music, to dive deeper into our arts, and create with Soulforce. And so another way of thinking about Soulforce is that it's the place where our art, our well-being, and the world's hunger meet. And so another way of putting that is that when you are thriving in yourself, emotionally, spiritually, mentally, physically, then that's going to benefit your art, and that's going to benefit the world around you, because your art is a reflection of who you are at every level of your being. And so this is my idea behind Soulforce Arts and the Soulforce Arts Institute. This is kind of the vision that I'm working towards. And maybe I'll pause there. I have more I can say about some of the obstacles that are getting in the way of that, but just kind of curious how that's landing with you so far.
Well, there's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah.
So let's start. You mentioned the Alexander technique a few times.
Yes.
I sense some people might have a sense of what that is. Some might not. So can you baseline to tell us what that is, and then I guess how that intersects with the work that you're doing teaching students?
Absolutely. Alexander technique is a method of learning how to use your body with less tension, less strain, and more freedom and more fluidity. And I found it incredibly helpful. Like I said, I had injuries in both arms, overuse injuries, like tendonitis kind of thing, from playing violin. I used to play violin with so much tension, and it taught me how to play much more freely. And that made such a difference on to every level of my playing. So I'll say one more thing. So Alexander technique doesn't necessarily have to do with just violin or even just music. You can apply it to anything in life. Any time when you're holding more tension in your body than you'd like to, you can apply some of the methods of Alexander technique and enjoy more comfort, more freedom, more feeling of inner support and fluidity in whatever it is that you do, whether it's like brushing your teeth, getting in and out of your car, having a conversation. So it has a very broad applicability. But to highlight its usefulness in music specifically and how it connects with Soulforce, I'll tell a little story. So many years ago, when I was going through my Alexander Technique teacher training program, well, there were many musicians in that program, all becoming teachers. Not all of us were musicians, but a lot of us were. And so there's this one pianist there who one day was receiving a lesson in front of the group. This was a common occurrence. And so she was playing her piece, something like Chopin or something like that. And so she played it before the teacher helped her. It sounded very nice. She got all the notes right. It was great, no problem. But she said that she was holding some tension while she was playing. And so the teacher used her hands to help the pianist release what seemed like an imperceptibly small amount of tension. Like from the outside, you couldn't really tell that much of a difference. But the shift in her music afterwards was stunning. All of a sudden, her music just became luminous. It like hit at that emotional level with such an immediacy and energy. It was so poignant. It was everything that you could ever want from a musical performance. And what struck me about that was how it wasn't that this pianist had gone home and practiced for 6 months, tried even harder to get the notes right. It's that she let go. And all of a sudden, her soul force came shining through. And so this is, to me, like the very definition of soul force, which is the transformative creative energy that comes through when you face your challenges, like playing Chopin or anything else, from a place of wholeness, aliveness, connection, freedom, as opposed to the force and contraction and control that is otherwise so common in our society.
So I'm curious then, as students, come to you, like I'm guessing these are like middle school, high school, elementary school students, like that's the age we're talking to come to you for lessons?
Actually, mostly professionals coming to me for
Interesting. Okay.
Alexander technique. Although I do teach young violin students as well, and I bring these same methods with them, and it works just as well.
So I guess same applies. My question will apply for professionals too. Are you finding then that you are, in a sense, untraining some of that, like as when you showed how you held the violin and that tension?
Yes.
Is there
Yes.
some untraining, for lack of a better word? And then, if so, because you're nodding, it makes me think the answer is yes. If so, is there some resistance to that from professionals or even from a student's teacher?
Yeah, great question. So yes, the answer to the first question is yes. A lot of unlearning. And the resistance, there is resistance, although maybe not quite in the way you might expect. So the usual response is, wow, this feels so good. Wow, my sound is so much better. Wow, this feels so much more free. And wow, I can do this difficult thing with so much less effort. It feels like nothing now. So that experience of the benefit of Alexander technique is so immediate and visceral and positive that that usually inspires a desire for more by itself. So that from that point of view, there's not much resistance, but there can be resistance in that. Well, why did this student get so tight in the first place? Well, it's because they wanted something. They're wanting some level of control, usually, or wanting to avoid shame, wanting to seek approval of others. And so there are all these underlying, you could say, shadow motivations that get revealed. And working with that material is a big part of what I do. So that's not strictly Alexander technique, working with the emotions um, and the mindset, but I find that helping students understand, like for instance, the true purpose of the arts really helps them let go of all of that. I can help recontextualize what they're trying to do from the sense of a larger purpose. And I'll say this briefly, what I believe the purpose of music and the purpose of art to be, and I talk about this at great length in my book, is to help bring us more to life, to inspire, heal, connect, to bring us together. And universally, in those moments of tension, in the moments of self-doubt, in the moments of stage fright, the inner critic, all those moments, those are all moments of not being in alignment with that larger purpose of bringing us to life. And oftentimes I'll ask my students, given that this is the purpose, becoming more alive, then, what do you make of that moment when you're doing that run and you're getting tight? And it just becomes immediately obvious to them, like, oh, well, if I'm getting tight, then I'm not playing in a way that's going to bring me more alive, my music more alive, my audience is more alive. And so that's all part of this redefinition, this kind of contextualization of the creative act towards something more life-giving. And that's what I absolutely love. And this is like the whole purpose of the Soulforce Arts Institute, is to bring that intention, that kind of process to music education, and I guess arts education overall, but I'm a musician, so this is where I work. And I just love that process.
So we could probably talk about that piece of this for much longer, but in the interest of time, I want to go to kind of the other big thing that you've talked about here. And it's kind of like, what is the purpose of the arts? What is the purpose of all of this? And I'm curious for your perspective on that. And again, going back to something you said previously, in today's world, where tension is high, in so many ways, politically, and you listed some of them. So I think we all have our own individual answers of where we think the arts fits into that, and why the arts is important to us. All of us in this space do, and there are probably different answers. But I'm curious for, what is your perspective on that, where the arts fit from, coming from this perspective of studying so much of this and talking about Soulforce. So I'm curious for that.
Again, a lot of people, or at least the conventional view in our society, is that the arts are nice, but kind of frivolous, or like weak sauce when it comes to actually making tangible changes. You don't often see musicians and artists invited to the White House for being included on big decisions. And yet, a while ago, I was talking with a friend about all this a couple years ago, I guess maybe before I started writing the book, or in the process of writing the book. She said, well, what else can reach beyond political divides other than music and the arts? It's possible to argue all day about this or that position, or this or that issue, and not get anywhere. And a big part of why we don't get anywhere is because we're all kind of stuck in our own worldviews, and there's all this emotional armoring that can happen, and the sense of confirming who we are and what we believe, and othering those people over there and making them wrong. And I believe that the arts can actually break us out of that dynamic, and that's might be their purpose, to be able to do that. You think about all of the greatest works of art, the cathedrals, the symphonies, the paintings, the whatever, think of in your own life, what uh, profound or enjoyable experiences with art that you've had, or music. You probably weren't in this space of like trying to be right, trying to make the other people wrong, this space of conflict. And the reason for that is because great art puts you in connection with something larger than your individual self. It heals the divisions inside you. It reaches beyond the emotional armoring. This is the measure of a work of art. How do we say that a work of art is really great? Well, its ability to do exactly this. And I believe that musicians and artists and music teachers have a responsibility to, I guess, recontextualize, redefine, to transform their own creative life so that they're able to bring about this kind of transformation, this level of inspiration, healing, and connection. Because otherwise, maybe the arts really would be weak sauce. Not all art is able to make this transformation happen. And I believe that the world really needs this transformation to happen right now. And it's utterly possible. Just like that story I was saying earlier, with that pianist, it was inside her, just waiting to be released. It was right there. Just one little release, and boom, there was the soul force. And it had that sense of inspiration of helping me move beyond myself. And I know it had that effect on the others in the room that day. And in contrast that to, I've been to concerts where this is some world-class virtuoso up on stage, and they're getting all the notes, and they're doing things that I could never even hope to do on the violin, for instance. And yet I walk away going, meh, because they didn't have that soul force. They didn't have that connection that came through. And so like music like that's probably not going to have this kind of healing, inspiration, connection kind of effect. And so my belief is that if we do get in touch with what the art and music, what the arts and music are really about, and we make that real in how we play, how we create, how we practice, how we teach, how we make a living, then that's going to have this effect of like being a beacon. Artists and our music can be a beacon for that healing that the world so needs right now. And this is my mission in life, is to help more and more musicians and artists achieve that transformative effect.
Well, very interesting stuff on all accounts, and probably we could talk for hours upon hours on this. But
Yeah.
where can folks find out more information if they want to learn more about what you've talked about today?
Yeah, great. So one good place to go is my website, soulforcearts.com. And there you can learn about my offerings, my book, courses, and all kinds of things. I have all my social media things on there. I have a YouTube channel and on Facebook and Instagram and all that kind of thing.
Well, awesome. So we will direct all of you to go there, soulforcearts.com. Joseph Arnold, thank you for being with us today.
Oh, it's been a pleasure, Mark. Thank you so much.
And thank you all for being with us on this edition of PMEA's Take Note podcast. We want to thank our sponsor, the Grove City College Department of Music. We'll see you next time.